Lord, the light of your love is shining in the midst of the darkness shining. Jesus, light of the world, shine upon us. Set us free by the truth you now bring us. Shine on me. Shine on me. Shine, Jesus, shine. Fill this land with the Father's glory. Blaze, Spirit, blaze. Set our hearts on fire. Flow, river, flow. Flood the nations with grace and mercy. Send forth your word, Lord, and let there be light.
Good morning and welcome to another episode of Let the Bible Speak. My name is Alex Meredith. I'm a minister from the Marquette Church of Christ here in the Central UP. I'm really glad you joined us here this morning. We are going to be continuing this series called The Crown. We'll get more to that in just a second. I actually want to start by just asking you to think about where you are in life. Where are you in life? I mentioned earlier I'm in the Central UP. I'm not exactly talking geographically here. Where are you in life? And how did you get to where you are? How did you get there? Who got you there? Maybe you could say yourself. You pulled yourself up by your own bootstraps and worked hard, and that's gotten you to where you are. Maybe you could attribute where you are to a spouse or maybe to a friend. I think as far as at least the good goes in our lives, a lot of us, I believe correctly, would say God, right? God has brought us to where we are. And the truth is, God is responsible for all of the good in our lives. I think about passages like James 1:17 that says that every good and perfect gift is from God, right? Now, you may ask, well, what about the bad? Because where I am in life may not be pleasant and all fantastic. First of all, I would point out that even the most unfortunate among us are tremendously blessed, right? I would also say that when you look at the bad in our lives, at least a lot of that, if not all of it, can be attributed to sin, whether it's sin committed by ourselves and we got ourselves into a mess. Perhaps it's the broken nature of the world brought about by sin. Maybe it's other people and their sin affecting you. Other people's bad choices sometimes do affect us, right? It's hard to exactly identify, but I do know that the good has come from God. But we're constantly tempted to remove God from the equation, aren't we? That's always a temptation. I hear these personal mantras all the time, things like, if you believe in yourself, anything is possible. Or have faith in yourself. Where is God in that equation? See, it's really tempting to allow our pride to devour God's glory, and for us to begin to take credit for things that God has actually done, even in our own lives, right? Now, when we talk about good leaders, and really this whole series, The Crown, looking at the early years of the Israelite monarchy, is all about good leadership, and we've been talking about godly leadership. And when we talk about godly leadership, or really just being a responsible Christian, I think this is a really important aspect of it here, because good leaders recognize God's activity and agency in the world, in history, in their own lives, and have a tendency to point upwards rather than inwards, if you know what I mean. Right? So again, and I just want you to think about the question again, how did you get to where you are? So the text that we're going to be looking at today is in 1 Samuel chapter 13, verses 1 through 14. I mentioned that we're continuing this Crown series. This series is really about the lives of Saul and David and what they teach us about godly leadership. I want to give you a little bit of context here because we're kind of jumping into the middle of a larger story. Some of the context here is that Saul, after he became king, he was appointed king. We talked about that last week. And after he took the kingship, he fought a lot of battles. Most recently, he defeated the Ammonites in battle. And now you have this tremendous threat posed by a group known as the Philistines. The Philistines, this was a seafaring group that many people believe migrated across the Mediterranean onto the western shore of the land of Canaan, right? And now they are sitting there on the south end of the land of Canaan, along the shore, imposing on the promised land, as it were, and Saul is charged with defeating them. And they are a formidable opponent, right? So that's some of the context going into this. So let's read. This is from 1 Samuel 13, beginning in verse 1. Saul lived for 1 year and then became king. And when he had reigned for 2 years over Israel, Saul chose 3,000 men of Israel. 2,000 were with Saul at Michmash and the hill country of Bethel, and 1,000 were with Jonathan in Gibeah of Benjamin. The rest of the people he sent home, every man to his tent. Jonathan defeated the garrison of the Philistines that was at Geba, and the Philistines heard of it. And Saul blew the trumpet throughout all the land, saying, "Let the Hebrews hear!" And all Israel heard it said that Saul had defeated the garrison of the Philistines, and also that Israel had become a stench to the Philistines. And the people were called out to join Saul at Gilgal. And the Philistines mustered to fight with Israel 30,000 chariots and 6,000 horsemen, and troops like the sand on the seashore in multitude. They came up and encamped in Michmash to the east of Bet-aven. When the men of Israel saw that they were in trouble, for the people were hard pressed, the people hid themselves in caves and in holes and in rocks and in tombs and in cisterns. And some Hebrews crossed the fords of the Jordan to the land of Gad and Gilead. Saul was still at Gilgal, and all the people followed him trembling. He waited 7 days, the time appointed by Samuel. But Samuel did not come to Gilgal, and the people were scattering from him. So Saul said, "Bring the burnt offering here to me, and the peace offerings." And he offered the burnt offering. As soon as he had finished offering the burnt offering, behold, Samuel came, and Saul went out to meet him and greet him. Samuel said, "What have you done?" And Saul said, "When I saw that the people were scattering from me, and that you did not come within the days appointed, and that the Philistines had mustered at Michmash, I said, now the Philistines will come down against me at Gilgal, and I have not sought the favor of the Lord. So I forced myself and offered the burnt offering." And Samuel said to Saul, "You have done foolishly. You have not kept the command of the Lord your God, with which he commanded you. For then the Lord would have established your kingdom over Israel forever. But now your kingdom shall not continue. The Lord has sought out a man after his own heart, and the Lord has commanded him to be prince over his people, because you have not kept what the Lord commanded you." More mistakes by Saul. Even during Saul's appointment that we looked at last week, we already saw this tendency of backing off from backing off from God's commands and God's words. And now you see that start to come to fruition a little more, right? His tendency towards disobedience. Now, I want to start out by addressing the first mistake. And when I say the first mistake, I really mean the most obvious mistake in this passage, which would be Saul's unlawful sacrifice. This is what we see happen in verse 9, right? Saul said, "Bring the burnt offering here to me and the peace offerings," and he offered the burnt offerings. Now, think about the situation here for a second. You had this tremendous Philistine threat. This was after, by the way, Saul and Jonathan. Jonathan is Saul's son, just for context here. Saul and Jonathan had kind of poked a hornet's nest, and the Philistines were ready to strike back at the Israelites. There had been a garrison of them in a certain city that had been wiped out, and so now they were striking back at the Israelites. And they were a formidable force, right? It said they had thousands of chariots and horsemen, and their troops were like the sand by the sea. And what did the Israelites do? They were cowering in fear. They were hiding themselves away in holes and in caves and tombs and cisterns. They were desperate. Said they were hard pressed, right? And so Saul is ready to defend Israel. He's ready to fight the Philistines, but he's been instructed by Samuel, evidently, to go to a certain place and to wait for Samuel to arrive, and then Samuel will seek the Lord's blessing by offering a sacrifice. Here's the problem. Saul has been waiting for Samuel for the appointed number of days. It sounds like he waited for him just enough, and he decides, you know what, I'll do it myself. Maybe it was a test of faith, a test of patience. But Saul's solution is to do it himself, which if you look at passages like Deuteronomy 18, Leviticus 1, Jeremiah 33, really the whole book of Leviticus, Saul was not supposed to do this. The only ones who were authorized to present these sacrifices, these ceremonial sacrifices, the only ones allowed to do that were Levites, Levitical priests. Saul was not of the tribe of Levi. I believe he was of the tribe of Benjamin, is what it says in chapter 9 when he's appointed. But he's not a Levite. He wasn't supposed to do this. And so Samuel, of course, he arrives just after this happens. Doesn't that always happen when we do something we know we're not supposed to do? We get caught right after. So Samuel comes right after and says, "What are you doing? Saul, what have you done?" And Saul tries to justify it, right? You see that in verse 12. The Philistines were coming. They were going to come fight us. And so what does it say? So I forced myself. That sounds a whole lot like the old, the devil made me do it. Saul had a choice, right? Saul had a choice. We all always have a choice. And Saul chose to disobey. And he did disobey God's word. That was the accusation Samuel made against Saul, in fact. Look in verse 13. You have not kept the command of the Lord your God, with which he commanded you. So he disobeyed God, but this really represents a larger problem, doesn't it? The larger problem being that Saul never recognized God's authority. He never recognized God's presence. He never recognized God's activity. It was all about him. And that's what leads me to the second mistake made in this passage here. And it's actually the one that's made first chronologically, but this is a more elusive mistake, the one that's maybe not so easy to catch on to, right? Which is that Saul allowed his pride to swallow up God's glory. Saul allowed his pride to swallow up God's glory. So we're going to read verses 3 and 4 again. I want you to listen carefully to this. Verses 3 and 4 of 1 Samuel 13. Jonathan defeated the garrison of the Philistines that was at Geba, and the Philistines heard of it, and Saul blew the trumpet throughout all the land, saying, "Let the Hebrews hear." And all Israel heard it said that Saul had defeated the garrison of the Philistines. Do you see any problem there? For one thing, it's Jonathan. It's not Saul and the men under his command. It's Jonathan and the men under his command that actually defeat the Philistines at Geba. And yet Saul goes out of his way, blows the trumpet, says, "Let the Hebrews hear." And apparently he was announcing that he was the one who had defeated the Philistines. We see all throughout the Sauline narrative, by the way, that Saul is very jealous for attention. Same thing happens in the story of David and Goliath, when David defeats Goliath, and then people begin singing songs about David, and Saul is just, it's not as if Saul could take credit for that. He was just really angry and jealous that David was getting all the attention. Well, Saul made sure that Jonathan didn't get the attention here. It was all about him. So he takes credit. And I guess you could say, Saul's the one in charge, so the people in charge always get either the credit or the blame. But it wasn't really even Jonathan either. If you go all the way over to chapter 14, verse 23, this is actually after some more fighting. And Jonathan, even though the Philistines are posing this gigantic threat against them, Jonathan has the faith and the courage in God to go fight against them. And he wins once again. And what does it say in chapter 14, verse 23? So the Lord saved Israel that day. And that's something really interesting about the way Scripture works. Oftentimes you have these events of human activity, right? Saul did this, Jonathan did this. And then it'll come back at the end and say, and God did this. Because what happened? Well, in reality, the entire time, God was behind it. It was God working through Jonathan to defeat the Philistines. It was never about Jonathan. It was never about Saul. So when Saul takes all the credit for himself, he was trying to rob God of his glory. But good leaders recognize God's agency and point upwards, not inwards. So this act of disobedience by Saul has a lot of really big consequences. The primary consequence of which, in verse 14, now your kingdom shall not continue. He actually makes the remark that, Saul, if you hadn't done this, your kingdom would have continued on forever. But now, as it stands, your kingdom is being taken away from you. So the kingdom would not pass on to Jonathan. It would go to a totally different person. Right? Nobody in that immediate family. So Saul and Jonathan have the kingdom taken away from them because of Saul's mistake. And he's going to seek out now a man after his own heart, which many attribute to David. I think it ultimately actually refers to Jesus. We'll get more to that later down the line in the series. Also notice here in verse 14, the Lord has sought out a man after his own heart, and the Lord has commanded him to be prince over his people Israel. We talked last week about the fact, or maybe it was 2 weeks ago, the fact that every time God refers to the king of Israel, he uses the word prince. It's a very specific word that's translated as prince because it implies some sort of subordination, right? But then every time Israel refers to the king, it's this term that means absolute ruler. They have different perceptions about what the kingship should be in the first place. So when we talk about the Old Testament in general, I really think that the entire Old Testament is an invitation to witness God's activity throughout the course of history. I mean, think about every major step of the Old Testament, right? Creation, the patriarchal period, the Exodus, the Canaanite conquest period, the Judges era, the monarchical period, the Israelites living in exile in Babylon and then in Persia, the Israelite restoration. All of it is an invitation to witness and see God's activity through it all, right? You think about Genesis chapter 1 in the narrative of creation. It's telling how the world came to be, and the whole point is to say, look, all these stars and the sun and the moon, these things that many people in the ancient world would say, well, that's a god, and that's my ancestor, whatever. He's saying, no, this is all evidence of a singular creator, of one God. Genesis is an invitation to experience that and to come to understand that and witness him in the context of creation. The patriarchal period helps us to see how God was active through the lives of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. You think about the Exodus, the parting of the Red Sea wouldn't have happened without God. Moses going back into Egypt before the Pharaoh wouldn't have happened without God. The Canaanite conquest, they couldn't have conquered Jericho without God. The Judges era, you think about Gideon and Samson, Deborah, all these different people that God guided to victory. The monarchical period with the appointment of Saul and David. The exilic period even. The book of Esther is a really good example of this. The book of Esther is one of the more interesting books in the Old Testament, particularly because the name of God is never mentioned. If I recall correctly, I don't think God is mentioned a single time. And it has these events which, the short version of it is you have the Israelite exiles living very far away, now under the control of Persia. and the Persian ruler has a second-hand man named Haman who's really out to get the Jews. He really does not like them. And God works through Queen Esther, who is a Jew, through the help of her uncle, to make sure that the Jews are kept safe. And she ultimately prevents a Jewish genocide from happening under the rule of, I believe it's King Xerxes at the time. And not once does it ever mention God. But that's just the thing. The entire book is an invitation to say, I know he's not mentioned, but look at the ways that he's working throughout the whole thing, right? The entire Old Testament is an invitation to bear witness to how God has worked and how God has brought us here. A few passages I want to look at for a second here. Start in Deuteronomy chapter 8, verse 17. Deuteronomy 8, 17 through 19. Listen to this. Beware, lest you say in your heart, my power and the might of my hand have gotten me this wealth. You shall remember the Lord your God, for it is he who gives you power to get wealth, that he may confirm his covenant that he swore to your fathers, as it is this day. And if you forget the Lord your God and go after other gods and serve them and worship them, I solemnly warn you today that you shall surely perish. So this plea to remember that it is God who got you here, and don't you forget it, right? Next passage is in Hosea. Hosea is one of the minor prophets towards the end of the Old Testament. It can be a little hard to find. Here we go. Hosea chapter 2, verse 8. Just one verse here. This is an accusation against Israel as they were worshiping all of these other gods. And she did not know that it was I who gave her the grain, the wine, and the oil, and lavished on her silver and gold, which they used for Baal. It was an accusation about them looking at these other idols, these other false gods, and going, it was Baal that did it for me. When in reality, it was God the whole time. It was God, Yahweh, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. It was the one and only true God who was giving them their blessings, and they were attributing it to something else. And they were critiqued for it. And then finally in Psalm 78, verses 1 through 4, give ear, O my people, to my teaching. Incline your ears to the words of my mouth. I will open my mouth in a parable. I will utter dark sayings from of old, things that we have heard and known, that our fathers have told us. We will not hide them from their children, but tell them to the coming generation the glorious deeds of the Lord and his might and the wonders that he has done. If you remove God from the equation of history, if you remove God from the world today, think about what would really happen. There'd be no Abraham. There'd be no Joseph. And so there would be no Moses. There'd be no Joshua, no Gideon, no Samson, no David, no exilic return. There'd be no cross, no forgiveness, no church, no Jesus, no us, by the way. Right? If you take God out of the equation, I mean, how do we even exist? So is that really what we want to do? Of course not. Then why is it that we're trying so hard to remove God from the equation? We go back to this idea of good leadership. And again, I'll say this doesn't just apply to leadership. This applies really to any responsible Christian. They recognize God's activity and agency in history, in the world, and in their own lives, and point upwards, not inwards. I'm not convinced that most people are actively trying to remove God from the equation. I try not to be too big of a skeptic. I don't think most people are trying to remove God from the story. It's just really easy and tempting to either forget or to take credit yourself, right? I mean, it feels good when people look at you and go, wow, what an accomplishment. What a success you've been. Getting into preaching there were a lot of things I didn't expect about getting into preaching, for one thing. But one of the things that I wasn't mentally ready for, I suppose, was the fact that people will sometimes come up to you. And I will readily admit there are thousands of people who can preach circles around me all day. Certainly don't claim to be one of the best out there, but I believe that God occasionally, He works through me to bring about meaning and powerful messages to people. And there will be people who will come up and say things like, really powerful message today, really good lesson, really good job. That's the one that really gets me when they say good job. And for a long time, I just responded without thinking about it. I think my go-to was, well, thank you. And after I thought about it a little bit, I felt a little off about that. I thought, I don't know if I should say thank you, because what did I really do? I mean, yes, I suppose I cooperated with the process, but it was God working through me. So I started moving towards, and I still slip up every now and then, of course, but when I remember, I try to say, praise God for that. And I don't say that to pat myself on the back. I just say that to share my own personal experience with dealing with that struggle of where to give credit and how to do that. And for you, it may look different, or it may look very similar. I don't know. Before we wrap up, I want to give you some concrete advice for how to make a habit of pointing upwards, not inwards. First of all, pray. Pray. Prayer forces reflection. It makes you think about what God has done. It makes you think about what God is doing and will do. And that naturally leads us to, I think, a state of thanksgiving. So prayer is a very important part of that. Second part of it, don't forsake the assembly, right? Because when we sing, when you hear biblical preaching, when we partake at the Lord's Supper, it is all a reminder about what God has done, right? Or it should be. And then my third piece of advice, and this might sound a little strange. Stop saying good luck. Stop saying good luck. This was actually told to me by somebody else. It was something I hadn't really thought about, but when you say good luck, it sort of takes the situation out of God's hands and places it somewhere else, even if that somewhere else is some abstract notion, right? Our speech needs to reflect this reality that God has brought us to where we are today. We have plenty of reason to point upwards, don't we, church? Most of all, I think about Jesus and His cross. We have so much to be thankful for. So whatever you do in the coming week, make sure that you're pointing upwards and not inwards. Thank you so much for being here with me this morning. I hope that you have a wonderful and blessed week. May God bless you in all that you do.
Glory